Welcome to Doing Business in Africa. I'm Sue Bierkus and we're here in Uganda, known as the Pearl of Africa. Let's find out what it's like doing business.
Coming up, a look at how Uganda plans to manage its massive oil wells, why the country's flower and tourism sectors are optimistic about the future, and why you should be paying attention to Uganda's property market. We also look at a day in the life of a telecoms investor in Uganda. And finally, Uganda might be a major coffee exporter, but here's one man's quest to get Ugandans drinking their own coffee. In the early 20th century, Britain's World War II Prime Minister Winston Churchill paid a visit to Uganda, and he was so overcome by the natural beauty and resources of the country that he dubbed it the Pearl of Africa. Today in Uganda, you'll find that statement is still true. The country has some of the world's richest mineral and agricultural resources. Over 1,073 bird species and half the world's rare mountain gorillas reside here. Uganda is Africa's largest exporter of Robusta coffee. Not to mention, it is in fact the source of the Nile River. And now Uganda is finally starting to exploit its vast crude oil resources, something which, due to political instability and lack of infrastructure, was not possible before. There are 4 major exploratory companies in the industry. The largest is Irish company Tullow Oil. They've discovered the most oil so far, but it's still early days.
Yeah, we've discovered around about 600 million barrels of resources. That's barrels of oil we think we can produce from the ground. We think there's over 1 billion barrels here in Uganda, and that's sizable. Given that Uganda produces or needs about 11,000 barrels of oil a day here.
Only exploiting Uganda's oil now is seen by many as a blessing rather than a curse.
I think we've been very lucky. We neither exploited our petroleum or our minerals in the past when we had absolutely no capacity to manage them. We are now in control. As a government, we are in control. We will collect our taxes. We have a strong Uganda Revenue Authority. We will manage our environment. We have a very strong National Environment Management Authority. We will manage standards.
Oil is Uganda's biggest import, amounting to millions of US dollars every year. And so government plans to use the processed field domestically and regionally, as well as help ease some of the power shortages restraining the country's growth. The question being asked now is, can Uganda avoid the resource curse?
Our challenge is how to now put that revenue to use. We think that, and the government has taken a decision that we shall have refineries here. We shall process our oil in the country so that we have the best benefit, not only from the oil itself, but also from the byproducts.
Analysts seem confident that government is managing the legislation and policy process well, and production is expected to start next year.
Well, I think government are being very sensible because as soon as they got the first discoveries of oil, they stopped giving out blocks of land for oil exploration while they took a step back and tried to figure out, ouch, what are we going to do with this oil? How are we going to manage it? And they suspended the tender process until they put into place a proper oil and gas policy. They took advice from that from places like Trinidad and Tobago, from Norway, and eventually, just last year, they actually put into place the oil and gas policy, which is a policy describing how you can give out tenders, describing how much profit sharing the government gets in relation to the turnover of oil.
Security in the north of the country has been a concern for investors, as Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army waged terror there for over 2 decades. But in 2005, the LRA was pushed out of the country, and now Kony and several of his commanders are wanted for war crimes by the International Criminal Court. While the oil reserves bordering the DRC and Uganda could prove a risk, both governments seem committed to securing the area, and investors share the sentiment.
You mentioned my Nigerian days. Security was very much paramount in my mind when I was there. We obviously take security very seriously, but it's assuring to see that Uganda and the DRC, for example, are in discussions, and we would like to think the security remains in our focus, but not the prime area of concern.
So does government see oil as the country's success story?
For us, we have created a very good competing climate for investment. We have in the past emphasized the areas that we need for investment. We have tried as much as possible to create a very good investment climate. In the past 2-3 years, we are emphasizing on infrastructure development. So it is not oil, as the emphasis is the investment climate, where you have We have lessened the cost of doing business by registration of business, by licensing, by good taxation rates, by rebates and refunds, and by exemptions where tax holidays where new investors come in.
Before 1986, Uganda was riddled with instability and experienced a series of coups. But under the leadership of Yoweri Museveni, the country has achieved an 8% economic growth rate for the last 5 years. The IMF says that a drop in remittances, aid inflows, and outflow of funds by portfolio investors will see this growth drop to around 5.5%. But compared with its global counterparts, this isn't too bad and is definitely leaps and bounds better than that first day Museveni stepped into office.
Yeah, in 1986, when we came into government, the economy was in shambles. There was no sector in the economy which was functioning. The export sector had been reduced to coffee alone, but most of it, because of the black market, it was also going on the black market. We had problems of revenue, government revenue. At that time, the former government was using mostly printing money to run the government. And so because most of the sectors had actually ground to halt, there were no revenues. And so we had to work hard to make sure that we bring back the revenue generating sectors.
For most of the 1980s, Uganda's main export was coffee. But in the 1990s, government started focusing on diversifying from being a monocrop state and attracted investment in other agricultural areas. One of these was floriculture. It was during this time that architect turned floriculture entrepreneur Stanley Mulumba started a flower farm as part of his retirement plan. He thought this would be a quiet time in his life.
Yes, the major shock actually in 2001 was basically the sale or the putting under receivership of most of the original flower growers. I think this was as a result of the bad prices that existed on the market, but also maybe there was a bit of financial mismanagement on some of the growers. But by and large, the industry, when it started in 1993, in East Africa, at least roses were not quite as a large market, especially in Kenya. When the Ugandans came in 93, started off with getting very good prices, the Kenyans also changed, realized that they could get much better money in flowers, and they came in a big way, which in a way flooded the market with flowers. You had also Zimbabwe, of course Israel also came in with a big product. So there was a drastic reduction in prices, and as a result there was a destabilization in the industry, and this led to a lot of farms being sold under receivership.
Then last year, the global financial system imploded, and Ugarose was forced to throw away a large part of its production due to poor demand in Europe. In addition, the company had to delay expansion plans and extend its loan facility. Stanley now is the only 100% indigenous African Ugandan flower farm owner in the country. And after a thorny ride so far, he's surprisingly upbeat about the industry.
I am optimistic because I believe that this crisis is not going to last forever. Maybe even if it goes on for another 2-3 years, as long as we can maintain our farms going, service our loans, pay the workers, and make sure that our gardens are okay, we should be able to look to the future.
In the 1960s, Uganda was the most popular tourist destination in East and Central Africa. But during the Idi Amin regime, most of the country's wildlife was destroyed. Now, as the country tries to revive this sector, it faces a new challenge: the global credit crunch.
Tourism alongside coffee is Uganda's largest foreign currency earner. Analysts say under the current tough global economic conditions, this industry may see revenues drop 20 to 30% from last year's $450 million US. While revenues may be low, government seems to be more concerned with development plans for when the global economy turns around.
The effect on Uganda tourism is not as bad compared to other countries, because after all, we are just beginning to come up. Countries where you have a lot of tourists, especially tourists who depend on new promotion, they are going to suffer more than Uganda. But what we are trying to do now, this is the period to prepare Uganda, to prepare the tourism products, to prepare the tourism infrastructure, because tough times never last. I don't know how long this will last, but by the time it's over, we want to make sure Uganda is in a better place to attract and satisfy the visitors who will be coming to Uganda.
Amos Wakesa is an entrepreneur in the tourism industry who knows all about tough times. Having started his business with nothing but a briefcase and a mobile phone, his business in total now has a turnover over $1 million. And if there's anything Amos likes to talk about, it's Uganda.
Generally, tourism is not a well understood subject in Uganda, even when we're one of the top 10 countries in terms of potential. So there's a generation that missed out during the Idi Amin, the wars. We are trying as a young generation to try and teach the older generation about the importance of tourism. And we're giving comparisons to countries that are already doing extremely well, like Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco. These countries are doing extremely well in tourism. But the potential we have in Uganda is massive. And of course, we're lacking proper infrastructure, but we're getting a few international lodges, chains coming in Uganda. We want people to come and invest on cruises on the Nile here. You know, when you talk about the Nile and you're in Europe, everybody thinks the Nile is in Egypt, but the source is in Uganda. You know, that this is the kind of thing. But now we're also convincing the government by giving them facts about what we can do to make sure the image of Uganda is improved. Because right now in the world, people don't know that we have been fighting very hard HIV. People also don't know that the wars have stopped. You know, Kony terrorized the northern part of Uganda, and this affected our image over a long period of time until about 3 years ago that Uganda became totally safe. And then the world also doesn't know that Idi Amin last ruled Uganda 30 years ago, and he's actually dead. So we want to change that story.
Uganda has been a free market economy for some 20 years, and its recent political stability has created the perfect playing field for investors and entrepreneurs. The tourism sector is starting from a low base, and as a result is attracting foreign and local players.
Right now as I speak, Uganda in general, things are changing. Tourism was predominantly foreign owned and was small scale. And you also had very few Ugandans that were participating. Even a post like mine, I'm the president of Uganda Tourism Association, it was never held by Ugandan. And now, because some of us have performed, you know, I own Great Lake Safaris, I own Primate Lodge, the main lodge in Chivale National Park, I've just built another in Queen Elizabeth National Park, and people are seeing that actually locals, I'm acting as an example to the locals. They can see if Amos can make it with his bad history, you know, his bad background, and then I can also make it. So the young people are now aspiring and coming into it, and it's creating a better relationship with the foreigners, and I'm feeling more comfortable investing in Uganda, because if the locals don't own Uganda, there's no way there will be stability in the country. But if you have more people like myself owning part of Uganda, stability is assured. So if people are also seeing it, that as more Ugandans invest, more foreigners are coming in the country and investing. You can see South Africa is everywhere in Uganda. You talk about MTN in South Africa, you talk about Nando's here in Uganda, talking about chains of different things, DSTV, you know, everywhere you turn you see South Africa here. And I'm very happy. Many of the guys, South Africans who are here, would never want to go back.
Uganda's favourable investment climate and untapped resources are just some of the reasons why Ugandans who've been living overseas are coming back in droves. After the break, property entrepreneurs, how to supply the demand for over 1 million houses in Kampala alone, and a look at a new telecoms operator entering the market. Could MTN and Zain have something to worry about? Coffee might be the top exporter of Uganda, but creating a domestic market is a whole different story altogether, as one entrepreneur finds out. Doing Business in Africa is winner of the Best TV Feature of the Diageo Africa Business Reporting Awards. There are two things you notice when driving around Kampala. The first are the Bora Boras, motorcycle taxis, which are definitely the quickest and easiest way to avoid a traffic jam. The second is the amount of banks. There are over 20 banks in Uganda to service a population of some 30 million people. While these banks were not exposed to toxic subprime assets, the financial sector suffered a major shock when, like other open African economies, foreign investors pulled their money out during the height of the crisis. Starting from a low base has been a blessing in disguise, as less damage was caused. But industry players say there are tangible measures that can be put in place to buffer the industry from future crises.
From nothing, we have a market with a market cap of about 5.8 billion shillings. We've seen trading, from nothing to about 121 billion last year. So there's been progress, and I think we will need to just keep ensuring that we have more products listed on the market. On the policy framework, we need to develop institutions that have long-term liabilities. So there's quite a bit of work to do with the development of the pension sector, pension funds, liberalization of pension funds, because we don't have too many institutions with long-term liabilities, apart from the National Social Security Fund. So that's an area we still need to work on. We also need to educate our people about transparency in business, accountability.
Regional financial activity is thriving though. Just last year, Kenya's Equity Bank bought out Uganda Microfinance for 1.6 billion shillings. Not a bad investment, seeing as the bank now opens around 1,000 new accounts every day.
Before Equity came in, we were registering on average about 120 accounts every day. 3 months later, we are registering about 300. Another 3 months later, we are registering about 800. Today, we are registering over 1,000 accounts every day. And this is because we have increased our network, we have opened up banking halls, and we have done away with the bank charges and ledger fees. So anybody can come and open an account just like that.
And in June last year, the bank consolidated its presence in the country by becoming the 11th stock to be listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Mortgages and similar banking products are pretty nascent in Uganda. But a growing middle class and wealthy expats returning to the country means that these are certainly more popular than in the United States or Britain.
If you're thinking about investing in real estate in Africa, you might want to think about Uganda. Political stability as well as increased investor inflows has meant that this sector is one of the fastest contributors to the country's GDP.
Uganda is a very new market in terms of real estate. Given all the upheaval that's happened in the past, people are realizing that now an investment in real estate is actually the way to go. It's the most steady form of investment that people can actually get into. So you'll see that there is a lot of developments taking place, a lot of companies actually putting in real estate all over the place.
With around 1 million houses to build in Kampala alone, demand is driving the market. But for the residential sector, selling the idea of gated communities similar to those found in South Africa was no easy task.
It was very hard to change people's perceptions, as Ugandans like their own space, like to have their own plots. But once they saw the project come up, the first phase of the project, we've actually sold out about 70% of the first phase. And Ugandans are coming round to the idea of community living.
And overcoming perceptions that political stability is still a concern is an ongoing challenge.
For myself, if I can talk on a personal basis, I've lived in the U.S. for over, 27 years, and literally 8 months ago, we came back home, my family, my husband, and all my children, and I would not do anything else. I mean, I realized that, whatever happened in the past has happened in the past. The amount of growth and the amount of development, the amount of economic change that's taken place in Uganda, and I think on Africa as a whole, is phenomenal. And so anybody that's worried about what political issues there may be, you know what, they don't need to worry.
One thing that is a worry, though, is the country's infrastructure, although this is top of government's agenda.
You'll go around town. We have some good, nice roads, but some of the roads are really terrible. And government has promised us that in coming years, they're going to put their energies to roads. The biggest challenge has been the roads. In terms of water and electricity and other networks, telephone lines and all that, I think these companies like National Water, they've done so well that they've put water in places that have never received piped water before. And to us, that is good as people are considering real estate, because it gives value to the properties that we promote and properties that we develop.
There are plans underway to construct between 1,200 and 1,500 kilometres of roads in Uganda before 2012. So they are looking in the right direction. They're sensible enough to look at where the mining operations are, where the oil operations are, and immediately improving the infrastructure. The road from Kampala to the eastern border at Malaba has just been resealed to an extremely high standard. The road from Kampala to Hoima, which is the hub of the oil industry, has just recently been resealed. So the government is looking very seriously and taking advice from the investors, which I think is important. The government here is prepared to listen to investors, to take advice so that everybody works together.
While road infrastructure might still be a challenge, Uganda was one of the first countries in Africa to embrace mobile phone technology. The continent's biggest mobile phone company, MTN, also happens to be Uganda's biggest taxpayer. But the question is, how much room is there for other players? TalkTel is a new entrant to the market run by two entrepreneurs determined to make mobile costs more affordable.
We thought that we can offer services that were very competitive. It would allow the common man who's making an average of $100 per month to be able to afford the service, therefore expanding the telecommunications amongst the common people. At the moment, the tariffs are cost prohibitive for most of the locals in Africa. The prices are too high. We feel that we have a product that we can offer to the general public that they can afford.
So what's it like investing in an industry known for high returns, but also high risk?
At the current environment, it's very conducive for American entrepreneurs, American companies. There are ground floor opportunities here that you can come in and take advantage of. There are very good incentives, tax-free breaks, and the VAT sometimes eliminated for importing of equipment, which allow us as telecommunication companies or any other manufacturing or any industry to have a break, and therefore you can have lower operating costs and lower initial setup costs, which will allow us to pass on those savings to the consumers.
Doing Business in Africa is winner of the Best TV Feature of the Diageo Africa Business Reporting Awards. There are a few words that can accurately describe Uganda: resilient, entrepreneurial and friendly. In this land of plenty, there is always an opportunity behind every corner. Just ask Michael Kajumbo, founder and owner of 1,000 Cups of Coffee. Tired of seeing his country's delicious coffee being exported overseas, and of course being a coffee addict himself, he was determined to help foster a local demand for the drink.
For historical reasons and maybe some oversights, Ugandans haven't been encouraged to drink coffee. For all purposes, coffee has been made for export. So that's the biggest challenge, to start that culture.
There's no way we add value locally to all that Robusta. That's a lot of Robusta that we produce. I think we exported over $330 million worth of coffee, both mainly Robusta and a little bit of Arabica. But we do need to value add. We already have some exports in roasted coffee. We have two companies coming in for instant coffee, two new companies. That's Tata of India and a Libyan-Ugandan joint venture going into instant coffee. So we are hoping to export more. The Chinese market demands instant coffee. They do not have the time to brew coffee.
But for Michael and his customers, there's nothing quite like a slow brewed cup of coffee. The only problem is choosing which one.
We will start here. Okay. Here you see some of the coffees, the best coffees Uganda can produce. Okay. You got the natural Robusta from the Lake Basin, you got the natural Arabica from Mount Rwenzori, You got the Wash Arabica from the Western Rift Valley. Then you got the Wash Robusta from the Lake Victoria Basin. Literally, you can have multitudes of combinations of these. You can make your own blend. Okay? And you will come up literally with more than 1,000 different types of coffees.
Uganda's investment climate is something totally unique. Sound macroeconomic policies perfectly placed geographically between growing markets like South Sudan and the DRC, a great education system, a stable banking sector, a secure environment, and most importantly, really friendly people.
Uganda is a welcoming country. Based on our culture, we love visitors. And Uganda is one place that you walk in, set up a business, and nobody will ask you about where you come from, who you are, and which tribe you belong to. That's one thing that I appreciate about Uganda, unlike other places that we've been.
For business to thrive in an African country, in Uganda, for anybody to invest his money in Uganda, he has to first love Uganda. He has to know he's comfortable in Uganda. He has to know that he will be safe in Uganda. Now that is the thing that is happening right now. The history is already gone. If you read books today, you'll find that Africa's friendliest people are in Uganda.
Doing Business in Africa is winner of the Best TV Feature of the Diageo Africa Business Reporting Awards.